holding us back? Why don't you move to a nursing home and let us live our lives?" I stood silent and simply walked out. The very next morning, I stopped every mortgage payment. I'm glad you're here. Follow this story to the end and drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far it travels. The chandelier threw a soft glow across the table as I set the final fork in place. Sunday lunch had always been our family tradition, especially since I'd moved in with my son Thomas and his family 3 years ago. At 72, I cherished these small contributions, setting the table, helping with the meal, making sure everything felt welcoming. "Mom, did you put out the good napkins?" Thomas called from the kitchen. "Yes, dear," I answered, smoothing the crisp white linen I'd ironed that morning, the ones Miranda insisted suited their new lifestyle better than the cotton set I'd brought from my old home. My fingers rested on the polished mahogany table, so different from the worn oak where I'd raised Thomas after his father passed. That table had been the heart of our home, filled with homework sessions, laughter, and the occasional tear. I'd sold it, along with the house itself, to help Thomas and Miranda buy this Westlake Hills mansion. "Grandma, the salad forks are on the wrong side again," 17-year-old Cleo sighed, sweeping into the room in designer jeans worth more than my monthly pension. She dramatically rearranged the silverware, rolling her eyes as though my mistake was unbearable. "Thank you, dear," I said softly, pretending poor eyesight. The truth? My vision was fine. Over the years, I'd learned it was easier to accept blame than spark conflict. Miranda entered with the roast I'd prepared that morning. "Clarice, why don't you sit down? You must be tired." I wasn't tired, but I nodded, taking my usual seat at the far end of the table. Out of the main conversation's flow, Thomas carved the roast with flourish, serving Miranda, then Cleo, then himself, and finally me. Talk swirled around charity committees, golf games, and college applications. I smiled politely, hiding the letter I'd received yesterday, inviting me on a European river cruise with old colleagues. I knew better than to mention it. "Mom," Thomas said suddenly, "don't forget your doctor's appointment Tuesday. I asked Mrs. Peterson next door to drive you since Miranda and I are busy." "I can take the bus," I replied. I'd ridden public transit all my life. Miranda gave a light laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "At your age, buses aren't safe." "What if you got confused?" Before I could protest, Cleo snorted. "Just accept the ride, Grandma. It's not like you have anything else to do." I set my fork down, the small clink loud in the quiet. "Actually, I was planning to meet some old friends next week," I said, keeping my voice steady. Thomas barely looked up. "Those old classmates?" "Mom, you haven't seen them in years. They've probably forgotten you," Miranda added sweetly. "And remember how damp weather bothers your joints. Better to stay home." I didn't have arthritis, never had, but contradicting them seemed pointless. Then came the final blow, talk of the mortgage. "The interest rate is crushing us," Thomas complained. "Well, maybe if Grandma didn't insist on living here, we could downsize," Cleo muttered, stabbing her roast. "Everyone else's grandparents live in retirement communities." Miranda offered no real objection. I kept my eyes on my plate, my appetite gone. "You're just a burden to this family," Cleo said, her voice slicing through the room. "Why don't you move into assisted living and let us live our lives?" The silence that followed felt endless. I looked at Thomas and Miranda, my own son and his wife, as they exchanged a quick glance. Neither moved to defend me. "Cleo," Thomas said at last, his voice flat, "apologize to your grandmother." "Why should I?" she shot back, tossing her napkin on the table. "You say the same things when she's not here." Another heavy pause. I stared at my son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father passed, the boy I'd worked 2 jobs to send through college. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. "Excuse me," I said quietly, rising from the table with all the dignity I could gather. No one stopped me as I walked upstairs to my small bedroom, the one farthest from the family's wing of the house. I closed the door behind me, hands trembling not from age, but from a sharp, cold anger I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, while the house was empty, I made a single phone call to my bank. Every automatic payment to the mortgage company, canceled, effective immediately. Then I pulled out my old leather suitcase, its brass clasps dulled with age. The faded tag still carried the address of the home I'd sold 3 years earlier, Sycamore Lane. It wasn't a grand house, just a 3-bedroom with a sunny garden and bookshelves Thomas himself had built for me in high school. But it was mine, paid off after decades of careful saving on a professor's salary. I had never planned to leave. Even after retirement, I'd imagined hosting book club meetings there, mentoring students, and watching my granddaughter visit on weekends. But Thomas had other ideas. "You can't keep living alone in that big house, Mom," he'd said soon after my 69th birthday. "What if you fall? What if something happens?" "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself," I'd replied. "And it's not that big." But the seed was planted. Soon he and Miranda were showing me brochures for retirement communities with names like Golden Horizons and Sunset Meadows, all smiling photos and soft promises. "We're just thinking of your future," Miranda had said sweetly. "You'd be with people your own age." Nurses on staff. Safe. I refused. I was still teaching literature at the community college, still driving, still hosting dinner parties. Nothing was wrong with me. Then came the proposal. "Mom, we found the perfect house I knew," Thomas announced one afternoon. 5 bedrooms, a pool, everything we've dreamed of," Miranda added. "But it's just out of reach. Unless I sold my house and used the proceeds to help them buy it. In return, they said, I'd have my own space in their new place. I'd never have to worry about maintenance. I'd be part of the family. It makes financial sense for all of us," Thomas explained. "Property values in your neighborhood are falling. This is a smart move." What he didn't mention was that my $400,000, every penny from the sale of my home, would go directly into their dream house. And from my pension, I'd also contribute to the monthly mortgage. "It's still cheaper than a retirement community," Miranda pointed out. "And you'll be with family instead of strangers." I agreed, partly because I wanted to be close to my only grandchild, partly because Thomas made it sound temporary. "Just until we get settled," he promised. "Then we'll reassess." But there was never any reassessment, only a slow dismantling of my independence. First went my car. "You don't need the expense, why?" Thomas reasoned. "We can drive you." Except rides were always inconvenient, my requests met with sighs and schedule checks. "Can't you just order it online, Mom?" Then my furniture. "This armchair doesn't match our aesthetic," Miranda said. "Your bookshelves take up too much space." Piece by piece, my belongings disappeared, donated, sold, or banished to the garage. Only a few photo albums and boxes of Thomas's childhood mementos remained, things I refused to give up. "Are you sure about this arrangement?" my friend Margaret had asked. "It seems like you're giving up a lot." "It's temporary," I assured her. I believed it then. Family is supposed to bring comfort, yet my world had been quietly shrinking. Without a car, meeting friends for lunch became nearly impossible. Without a space of my own, hosting gatherings was out of the question. Phone calls from old colleagues grew rare. What was there to share when my days felt so small? 6 months ago, I'd mentioned using a bit of my savings to join a literature-themed cruise with my friend Margaret. "Mom, that's not wise," Thomas said firmly. "The market is unpredictable. You should conserve your savings." "It's my money," I replied, surprising even myself. The look Thomas and Miranda exchanged, annoyance edged with panic, told me everything. "Actually, Mom," Thomas said carefully, "we were hoping you'd consider adding a little more to the mortgage for now." Property taxes went up, and with Cleo's college applications, that was the moment I understood. They had no plan to reassess. They expected me to keep funding their lifestyle forever, a silent ATM disguised as a grandmother. And I let it continue, because where could I go? My house was sold, my furniture gone, my circle of friends slipping away. I had become exactly what they wanted, dependent, until yesterday. "You're just a weight on this family," Cleo had sneered, her words slicing through years of pretense. Those words cleared the fog I'd been living in, the illusion that my sacrifices were for people who truly valued me. I looked around the small bedroom they'd given me, the one Miranda casually referred to as the future media room. Nothing in it reflected who I was. The bedspread, the artwork, even the carefully chosen books were all Miranda's idea of tasteful decor. I reached for the landline I'd insisted on keeping and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. "Margaret? It's Clarice. I need your help." 3 days later, I was organizing important documents when the front door slammed so hard a crystal bird on my dresser trembled. "Mom!" Thomas's voice thundered through the house. "Mom, where are you?" I slipped the folder under my pillow and smoothed my cardigan, ready for the confrontation I knew was coming. The door burst open. Thomas stood there, face flushed, a crumpled paper in his fist. Miranda hovered behind him, nails digging into his shoulder. "What is this?" he demanded, waving the paper. "It was a notice from the mortgage company. Missed payment, penalties." "It appears to be a letter from your lender," I said calmly. "Don't play games, Mom." The payment was declined. Your automatic transfer was canceled. Did you do this? For a heartbeat, I considered blaming the bank, as I'd done so many times to keep the peace. But Cleo's words echoed in my mind. Yes, I said simply. I canceled the payments. Miranda gasped. Thomas's face deepened from red to nearly purple. You what? How could you? Do you remember what Cleo said at Sunday lunch? I asked, my voice steady. About me being a weight on this family? Thomas flinched before his anger returned. She's a teenager, Mom. Teenagers say careless things. Yes, I agreed. But she only repeated what she's heard from you and Miranda. Miranda stepped forward, her tone sharp. That's unfair, Clarice. We welcomed you. Gave you a place to live. A place I paid for, I cut in, surprising even myself. Or have you forgotten that the down payment came from selling my home? That I've been covering part of this mortgage for 3 years? That was the agreement, Thomas said stiffly. You live here. You help with expenses. It's only fair. Fair? I let the word hang. Was it fair when you convinced me to sell my fully paid home by saying it was temporary? Was it fair when you slowly removed every piece of my furniture? Every memento that didn't fit your aesthetic? Was it fair when you cut me off from my friends? My independence? Thomas's jaw tightened. If you're so unhappy, you're free to leave. There are plenty of nice assisted living facilities, which I would have to pay for, I finished. And that's what this has been about all along, isn't it? My money. That's absurd, Miranda snapped. We've given you a home. A family. You've given me a small bedroom in a house I helped purchase. I corrected her. You've given me a seat at the far end of the table, close enough to watch, easy enough to ignore. You've made it clear I'm only welcome as long as I keep funding your lifestyle. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his late father's that it ached to see. Mom, if this is about what Cleo said, I'll talk to her. She'll apologize. But this, he waved the mortgage notice. This is serious. We can't afford this house without your contribution. I'm aware, I said evenly. I've been aware since you first showed me the listing and explained it was just out of reach unless I helped. Miranda stepped closer, her voice slipping into that careful, patronizing tone. Clarice, perhaps you're confused. This arrangement benefits everyone. You don't have to worry about living alone, about maintenance or yard work. I never worried about those things, I answered firmly. I love my garden. I loved my independence. I gave it all up because I thought my family needed me, because I believed I was valued. Thomas's expression shifted, anger giving way to calculation. Of course we value you, Mom. This is just a misunderstanding. Let's sit and talk like adults. There's nothing to discuss, I said. I've made my decision. What decision? Thomas asked, his voice tightening. I reached under my pillow and drew out a thick folder. I've kept records, Thomas. Every payment I've made on this house. Every conversation where you or Miranda discussed my finances. Every time I was told I couldn't use my own money because it needed to be conserved. Miranda's face went pale. You've been recording us? Not always, I replied. Only when it became clear what was happening. I may be older, but I'm not naive. Thomas lunged for the folder, but I stepped back, holding it tight. It's all backed up, I said quietly, and my attorney has copies. Attorney? His voice cracked in disbelief. Since when do you have an attorney? Since I realized I needed to protect myself from my own family. The room fell silent. Thomas and Miranda exchanged a long, wordless glance. So what now? Thomas finally asked, his tone cold. Are you threatening to sue us? Your own son? The pain in my chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm informing you. I will no longer be paying your mortgage. What you do next is your choice. Miranda's polite mask slipped, revealing the calculation beneath. If you think we'll keep supporting you while you pull this stunt, you're dreaming. No more free room and board. No more free, I echoed, a short, bitter laugh escaping. I've paid over $300,000 to live in this house. Nothing about it has been free. Thomas caught Miranda's arm, silencing her. What exactly do you want, Mom? I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised alone, the man standing before me now. I want what I've always wanted, Thomas. Respect. Honesty. To be treated as a person, not a checkbook. His face hardened. Well, you've made your choice. Don't expect us to help when you realize you can't manage on your own. He turned, pulling Miranda with him. The door slammed, leaving me in the quiet room that had never really been mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. After years of silence, years of putting their needs above my own, I'd finally stood my ground. I picked up the phone and dialed. Margaret, I said when she answered. It's done. They know. Are you okay? Her voice was gentle. No, I admitted, but I will be. 1 month earlier, the truth had dawned on me like a slow sunrise. I'd been sitting in the garden, a book in my lap, when Thomas's voice drifted through the open French doors. If we refinance now, we could pull out some equity, he said. For what? Miranda asked. The kitchen's perfect. I was thinking about that vacation property in Aspen. The one I showed you last week. Miranda laughed softly. Thomas, be serious. We can't afford a second home. We could, he said, if we use Mom's savings as a down payment. She's got at least $200,000 sitting there. My blood ran cold. I had never told Thomas the amount in my savings. I had never given him access. She'd never agree to that, Miranda said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely opposed. She doesn't need to know the details, Thomas said casually. We'll just tell her it's a smart investment. You know how Mom is. She never questions me about finances. The book slipped from my hands and landed softly in the grass. They were talking about my savings, the money I'd spent decades building as security for the future, the inheritance I'd hoped to leave for Thomas and Cleo. Besides, Thomas continued, it's not like she'll ever use it. What's she going to do? Go on a cruise at her age? Miranda laughed. Can you imagine? She'd probably get lost and end up in someone else's cabin. I sat perfectly still, letting their words settle like cold stones. Deep down, I'd known for a while they saw me more as a resource than a person, but hearing it spoken aloud, so bluntly, so carelessly, turned quiet suspicion into sharp reality. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I could confront them, but Thomas would deny everything or make me feel guilty for listening. I could refuse more money, but they'd find a way to pressure me. They always did. I needed a real plan, and I needed help. The next morning, I told Miranda I was going to the library. She barely looked up from her phone. Don't be too long. We're having guests for dinner, and I need you to polish the silver. Instead of the library, I took the bus downtown to the office of Harriet Goldman, a lawyer I'd known years ago, and she guest lectured in one of my literature classes. Professor Bennett, she said warmly, standing to greet me. Please, call me Clarice, I replied, settling into the chair across from her. It's been a long time since I taught anyone. Once a professor, always a professor, she smiled. What brings you here today? I drew a steady breath. I need legal advice about financial exploitation by family members. Her expression turned serious. Tell me everything. For the next hour, I explained it all. The sale of my house, the monthly mortgage payments, the slow erosion of my independence, and finally, the conversation I'd overheard about my savings. Harriet listened carefully, taking notes. This is unfortunately common, she said at last. Elder financial abuse is one of the fastest growing forms of exploitation, especially when family is involved. But there are steps we can take to protect you. What kind of steps? I asked. First, secure your remaining finances. Open new accounts at a different bank. New numbers, new passwords. Make sure Thomas has absolutely no access. Relief and sadness mixed in my chest. And the money I've already contributed to the house? That's more complicated, Harriet admitted. Your name isn't on the mortgage or deed? No. Thomas said it would be simpler that way. I'm sure he did, she said dryly. Without written documentation, it becomes your word against theirs. But we still have options. Do you have proof of your contributions, bank statements, emails? I have bank records. Maybe some emails from when we discussed selling my house. Good. From now on, document everything. Keep a journal of any financial conversations. If possible, record them. In Texas, you can legally record if one party consents. That's you. Even without recordings, detailed notes can be powerful evidence. She leaned forward, voice firm. Clarice, what's your ultimate goal? Do you want to recover the money, stay in the house? What outcome do you truly want? I'd asked myself the same question all night. I want my independence back, I said at last. I want a place of my own, where I make the rules and decisions. And yes, I'd like to recover what I can. But more than anything, I want Thomas to understand what he's done. Harriet nodded. Then, we need a comprehensive strategy, one that secures your future and gives you leverage to reclaim at least part of your investment. Over the next few weeks, I followed her instructions to the letter. I opened new bank accounts under Margaret's address. I documented every conversation, tucking my journal inside an old photo album, the one place I knew Miranda would never look, since she dismissed family photos as clutter. With Harriet's help, I found a small apartment in a senior living community. Not assisted care, but independent residences for people over 65. It wasn't fancy, but it was bright, clean, and most importantly, it would be mine. The monthly rent for my new apartment fit neatly within my budget, especially now that I'd stopped paying Thomas's mortgage. Quietly, I began removing the things that truly mattered. Photo albums, jewelry, important papers. A few items at a time, nothing noticeable. Margaret kept them safe along with the small suitcase I'd already packed. Each time Thomas or Miranda brought up money, I recorded the conversation using the discreet device Harriet recommended. It felt strange, almost disloyal to record my own son, but every time I hesitated, I remembered his voice. It's not like she has any use for it. When Harriet reviewed my bank records, the numbers stunned even her. Clarice, do you realize you've contributed more than $300,000 to their household in just 3 years? Between the house proceeds and monthly payments, it's financial exploitation. And we can prove it. The word exploitation rang in my ears. But Harriet was right. We had documentation and I had a plan. For a week after I canceled the mortgage transfers, the house turned icy. Thomas and Miranda alternated between cold silence and sharp demands. They tried guilt, threats, even a clumsy peace offering with Cleo holding a bouquet. "Grandma, I'm sorry for what I said," Cleo mumbled as her parents hovered with expectant smiles. "Thank you, Cleo." "That's kind of you," I said, accepting the flowers, and nothing else. Now it was Saturday morning. I'd insisted on this family meeting, choosing a time when no one could claim work or school as an excuse. I sat at the dining table, calm and ready, as they filed in. Thomas entered first, his face a mask of forced patience. Miranda followed, lips pressed thin. Cleo slouched in last, clearly annoyed that her weekend was being interrupted. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I have important things to share." "Mom, if this is about the mortgage again," Thomas started. I raised a hand, stopping him. "Please, let me finish." "This isn't only about the mortgage. It's about honesty, respect, and family." I placed a new folder on the table, carefully prepared with Harriet's help. 3 years ago, I sold my home and contributed $372,000 toward the purchase of this house. Since then, I've paid $2,100 every month toward your mortgage. That's another $75,600. In total, I have contributed nearly $450,000. Money I earned through a lifetime of teaching, saving, and planning. Miranda shifted in her chair. Cleo's expression changed from boredom to surprise. "We never forced you," Thomas said quickly. "It was a mutual arrangement." "Was it?" I asked, sliding a printed email across the table. "These are your own words, Thomas. This is just temporary until we get settled with the new mortgage. Then we can reassess." Color rose in his cheeks. "Market conditions changed." "You know that." "Yes," I said evenly. "Just like my role here changed, from welcome family member to convenient source of income. Just like my furniture disappeared because it didn't match your decor. Just like my friendships faded because you made it harder and harder for me to see them." "Clarice, you're exaggerating," Miranda interrupted, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension. "We've always treated you as family. Is that why you and Thomas discussed using my savings to buy a vacation property in Aspen?" I asked. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about." I withdrew a small recorder from my pocket and pressed play. Their voices filled the room. Thomas and Miranda calmly planning to use my savings as a down payment. Shock flickered across their faces, followed by outrage, then something close to fear. "You recorded us," Thomas sputtered. "That's perfectly legal in Texas," I replied. Single-party consent. Cleo turned wide eyes on her parents. "You were going to take Grandma's money for a vacation house?" Neither Thomas nor Miranda said a word. I looked at each of them in turn, my voice steady. "I've given you facts, documentation, and the truth. What happens next is your choice. But my future is no longer tied to this house, or to anyone who sees me as a bank account instead of family." The room was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. I had a plan, proof, and, finally, my voice. Their eyes locked on me, a mix of anger and calculation. "What do you want?" Thomas finally asked, his voice cold. "Is this blackmail?" "No, Thomas." I kept my tone steady. "This is clarity. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to state my decisions." I placed 3 envelopes on the table. The first, I said, sliding it forward, is a detailed accounting of every dollar I've contributed to this household. The second is a formal request for financial restitution, not the full amount, but what my attorney considers fair. Attorney? Miranda echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Harriet Goldman, I replied. She specializes in elder financial abuse cases. Thomas's face darkened. So you are threatening to sue? I hope it doesn't come to that, I said honestly. The third envelope is my notice that I'll be moving out next week. I've secured an apartment at Riverside Terrace. That senior place off Barton Creek? Miranda asked, surprise breaking through her composure. But it's so basic. It's what I can afford, I answered simply. After contributing so much to this house, my resources are more limited than they should be. A heavy silence followed. Cleo was the first to speak. You're really leaving? She asked. And for the first time in years, I heard something almost like concern in her voice. Because of what I said, I met my granddaughter's gaze. No, Cleo. Not because of what you said, because of what your words revealed about how I'm viewed in this family. I turned back to Thomas and Miranda. I deserve better than to be treated as a burden or a bank account. I deserve respect. Thomas stared at the envelopes, calculations flickering behind his eyes. The cost of a court fight, the embarrassment of discovery, the strain of paying the full mortgage. You won't win if you sue, he said at last, but the conviction wasn't there. Perhaps not, I allowed, but the discovery process would be enlightening. All the financial records, every conversation about my money, examined by a judge. Miranda's hand flew to her throat. You wouldn't. I don't want to, I replied calmly. I'd much prefer an amicable resolution, one that acknowledges my contributions and provides fair restitution. How much? Thomas asked bluntly. $150,000, I said. About a third of what I've put into this house. Enough for me to live comfortably without financial stress. That's impossible, Miranda blurted. You don't have that kind of money. You have equity in this house, I reminded them. The house my savings helped buy. You could refinance. Thomas's jaw tightened. And if we refuse? I held his gaze. Then we let the courts decide. Silence settled again. I could see the storm behind his eyes. Anger, calculation, perhaps even a flicker of shame. I'll need time to think, he said finally. Of course, I replied, rising. You have until Friday. After that, my attorney will proceed. As I turned to leave, Cleo's voice stopped me. Grandma. I looked back. The girl who had grown so distant now looked uncertain. Did you really pay for half this house? Yes, Cleo, I said softly. Then why did Mom and Dad always act like they were doing you a favor by letting you live here? From the corner of my eye, I saw Thomas and Miranda exchange a startled glance. For the first time, their carefully constructed story was beginning to crumble, and it was their own daughter who had cracked it open. 6 months had passed since I'd moved into my apartment at Riverside Terrace, and the morning sun now poured through my kitchen window. The small one-bedroom wasn't grand, just a cozy living room, a compact kitchen, and a balcony overlooking a courtyard garden. But it was entirely mine. Every chair, every picture on the wall, every book on the shelves reflected my taste alone. I ran my fingers across the smooth wood of the breakfast table, a vintage piece I'd refinished with Margaret during long afternoons filled with laughter and sawdust. For the first time in years, I felt at home. 3 months earlier, the settlement with Thomas had come through. $120,000 and the quiet return of several family heirlooms that had mysteriously vanished into their attic. Harriet advised me to accept it. A fair compromise, she'd said. Enough for a clean break. She was right. Combined with my pension and social security, it meant comfort, a few dinners out, symphony tickets, even the literature cruise Margaret and I had once only dreamed about. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. I smiled when I saw Margaret's name. Good morning, I answered. How was your date last night? She laughed, a warm, rich sound that always lifted me. Richard was a perfect gentleman. Took me to that new Italian spot. We're seeing the symphony next weekend. But that's not why I'm calling. Have you checked your email? Not yet. Why? The literature department is hosting a retirement dinner for Professor Williams next month. They're inviting all former faculty, and they specifically asked about you. Some of your old students are planning a tribute. A quiet warmth spread through me. Really? After all these years? You made an impact, Clarice. Your students remember. Will you go? I know it might be awkward if Thomas and Miranda show up. I considered it. Miranda still hovered around university committees for the social prestige. Yes, I decided. I won't let the possibility of an uncomfortable encounter keep me from celebrating Robert's retirement. He was a wonderful colleague. "That's my girl," Margaret said with approval. "Now what's on your schedule today?" "Book club this morning," I replied. "Then lunch with Harriet." She wants to introduce me to a friend who runs a literacy program. They are looking for volunteer instructors. "You're busier than I am," Margaret teased. "Call me after lunch. I want details." After we hung up, I finished my coffee and slipped on a light cardigan, gathering notes for book club. The group, mostly retired teachers and professors, had become a cornerstone of my new social life. Exactly the kind of lively conversation I'd missed. Today we were discussing Mrs. Dalloway, one of my favorites. A sudden knock startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Cleo stood there, shifting nervously from foot to foot. My granddaughter looked different, less polished, more real. Her designer clothes had been traded for simple jeans and a university sweatshirt. Her hair, once ironed flat to Miranda's standards, now fell in soft, natural waves. "Cleo," I said, surprised but pleased. "This is unexpected." "Hi, Grandma." She bit her lip. "Can I come in for a minute?" "I know you're probably busy." "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "I always have time for you." Her eyes widened as she took in the cozy space I'd created. "Your place is really nice," she said, almost surprised. "It feels like you." "Thank you." I guided her to the living room. "Tea or coffee?" "No, I'm fine." She sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly. I wanted to talk to you." Without Mom and Dad, I waited quietly. Whatever had brought her here clearly required courage. "I started college last month," she said at last. "UT Austin. I'm living in the dorms." "Congratulations," I said warmly. "What are you studying?" "English, literature." A small, proud smile flickered across Cleo's face. I blinked in surprise. Thomas and Miranda had always pushed her toward business or law, something practical. "Your parents must be proud," I said carefully. Cleo snorted. "They hate it." "Dad says I'm wasting my potential. Mom keeps sending me business school links." Then she met my eyes. "That's actually why I'm here. I found some of your old lecture notes in the attic about Virginia Woolf. They're amazing, Grandma. The insights, the connections. I never knew you were so passionate." "I was," I said with a small smile. "I am. My professor just assigned to the lighthouse, right?" she continued. "I've been reading your notes, but there are parts I don't understand." "Would you help me?" The request, so simple yet so profound, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I'd be honored," I said softly. Her smile lit up the room, unpracticed, genuine, vulnerable. "Really? That would be awesome." "Of course." I hesitated, then asked, "Does your father know you're here?" Her smile faded. "No, they don't talk about you much. And when they do," she trailed off. "It's not complimentary," I finished gently. "No." She looked down, then back up. "But I think they're wrong. About a lot of things. Including how they treated you." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "People are complicated, Cleo. Your parents made selfish choices, yes, but I let it happen for too long. I own my part in that." She nodded. "I'm sorry for what I said that day, that you were a weight on the family." I didn't mean it. I was just repeating what I'd heard. "I know," I said, smiling. "And in a way, I should thank you. Your words were the wake-up call I needed." For the next hour, we talked about Virginia Woolf, her classes, and the new freedom of dorm life. As she stood to leave, she hesitated. "Could I come back next week? Maybe we could make this a regular thing. I could bring my assignments, and we could discuss them." "I'd love that," I said, heart warm. "How about Saturdays? We'll have lunch and talk literature." "That sounds perfect." She surprised me with a quick hug. "Thank you, Grandma." I watched from the window as she walked toward the bus stop, the morning sun catching the natural red in her hair. My color, not Miranda's carefully maintained blonde. For the first time, I saw pieces of myself in her beyond mere resemblance. The book club could wait. Today had brought something far more precious than a literary debate. The chance to build a true relationship with my granddaughter, rooted in curiosity and respect, not obligation or money. I caught my reflection in the glass, shoulders straight, eyes bright, a quiet smile on my lips. Gone was the woman who once accepted silence and manipulation. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, unafraid to claim her worth. It took 72 years, but I finally found my voice, and with it, I found myself. What would you have done in my place? Have you faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoyed this journey, stay with me for more. I'm leaving 2 of our audience favorite stories on screen next. I think they'll surprise you. Thank you for watching to the end.